After 30 years of marriage, I had just learned that my two children, whom I had supported their entire lives, were not mine. I looked at Annie. We talk and talk some more. Maybe we'll stay together, maybe we'll split up, I said. Dan, that was over 28 years ago. Can't we leave the past in the past? Annie pleaded. No, we can't. You had sex with someone, and I want to know whose children I've been supporting their entire lives. According to these tests, Janice and Brad are brother and sister. That means you've had sex with someone for at least 5 years, so it wasn't a one-time fling or a mistake. Who the hell were you having an affair with? Hell, it must have happened in the first year of our marriage. When it comes to stories, this is one of those that is difficult to believe. A movie could be made out of the highs and lows that have occurred in my life. I have been married for more than 30 years, or at least that is what it seemed like to me. There are 3 children in my life that I adore very much. Initially, I was the proprietor of my own company, which was a service station or a gas station, if you find that to be a more appropriate description. It is now also a convenience shop at this point. Although I am not wealthy, I am able to earn a comfortable living for myself. In the beginning, I would like to mention that my son was admitted to the hospital a few years ago. He was 28 years old at the time, married, and had 2 children with his wife. He was also a father. An issue with his kidneys was identified as the cause of his condition. My wife, Annabelle, who I refer to as Annie, and I were concerned about the well-being of our son. We were informed by the medical professionals that he might require a kidney transplant if they were unable to bring the renal condition under control first. We were at a loss for what to do in order to assist our son. In the event that a transplant was required, the physician informed us that we might discuss the matter with members of our family. Since it was obviously about my son, I went to the laboratory and asked them to examine my status in order to discover whether or not I would be compatible with him. Although I had done this, my wife was unaware of it. It was before I informed the rest of the family that I made the decision to donate a kidney to him. The results of the test were returned the following day, and we were not a match. I inquired about the reason with the physician. First and foremost, he was my son. What exactly was the problem with my kidneys? I informed the physician in a very unequivocal manner that I had consumed a few beers, but that I did not smoke. But I didn't care that the doctor was feeling a little ashamed about it. I expressed my feelings to him. At long last, the physician requested that I report to the office building. It has been determined through the test that you are not the biological father of your son, Mr. Weller. Therefore, you and your kid are not a good match. Please accept my apologies for having to tell you this, but you have been speaking at an excessively loud volume. In light of the fact that we have previously committed errors, I will inform you that my helpers are currently rerunning the test. When I left the office, I was on the verge of being in a state of shock. For the past 28 years, he has been my son. It's hard for me to accept that this is actually taking place. Since I was concerned that there might have been an error, I refrained from informing Annie about it. I have to admit that I appeared to be upset when I laid eyes on her. My mind was filled with everything that you can possibly conceive. Janice, my eldest daughter, and Mandy, the tiny love of my life, are both examples of my children. Did I have children with them? Mandy was only 20 years old at the time, while Janice was 26 years old. It was my sincere wish that the physician was mistaken. I was still not coming to my senses, despite the fact that it had been 2 days. Some of that, of course, was connected to the fact that my kid might have passed away, and some of it was connected to the question of whether or not he was really my son at all. Annie, Brad's wife Gail, and I were sitting in the waiting room. The doctor came out and said, "I have good news." I was so happy. I thought he was going to tell me that the test was wrong and that my kidneys were perfect. But instead, he had good news, or rather, better news for Brad. Brad's kidneys are responding to treatment. He won't end up needing a transplant. In fact, his body is adapting so well to the treatment that he could be discharged in a couple of days. He'll have to watch his diet, but otherwise, he should make a full recovery. Everyone was so happy for Brad. The women were crying, and Annie kissed me. There was so much relief on her face. I haven't told her about the test yet. I would go back and talk to the doctor the next day. I asked Janice, Mandy, and Annie to take a DNA sample. They asked me why it was necessary, and I explained to them that if any of us had a problem like Brad's, the doctor would be able to prescribe treatment much faster if he had that information. Annie was a little nervous but agreed. The rest of us didn't hesitate, and it was just a swab taken in the mouth. Janice had one done on her children and her husband so they would be ready if there were any problems. The next day, I went to the doctor at the hospital and gave him all the samples. He gave me the bad news. Brad and I are not blood relatives. I asked him to analyze all the samples I gave him and put them on record so that other family members could get the information if needed. I will pay for all the tests. Mr. Weller, are any of them your family? They are all my family. 2 daughters, sons-in-law, grandchildren, my daughter's children, and of course, my wife. I want to know if those labeled as Janice and Mandy are my biological children. Even though they are adults, they are my children and have been all their lives. Brad was released from the hospital a few days later. He had another week to recover, and then he could go back to work. Everyone was so relieved that he wouldn't have to go through dialysis or, even worse, a transplant. I tried to stay calm, but it wasn't easy. I really needed to know if these girls were my blood. Annie asked me almost every night why I was acting so strange. I simply told her that we had been through a lot in life, and I was thinking about our children. And it wasn't a lie. I came home from work one evening, and Annie was sitting in a chair at the table, looking through some papers and crying. I realized it was the results from the hospital. They must have come in the mail. "When did you do it, and why?" she asked me. "I went to get my kidneys checked to give them to my son. Since I was his father, I figured it was my responsibility. When the doctor told me I was not his biological father, I sent the test to the girls. I don't know if they are mine or not." As I was picking up the papers, Annie said, "Janice isn't yours, but Mandy is." At this point, she was crying hard. "What happens now, Dan?" I stood there, unable to find the words. I didn't know what was going to happen next. After 30 years of marriage, I had just learned that my 2 children, whom I had supported their entire lives, were not mine. I looked at Annie. "We talk and talk some more. Maybe we'll stay together, maybe we'll split up," I said. "Dan, that was over 28 years ago. Can't we leave the past in the past?" Annie pleaded. "No, we can't. You had sex with someone, and I want to know whose children I've been supporting their entire lives. According to these tests, Janice and Brad are brother and sister. That means you've had sex with someone for at least 5 years, so it wasn't a one-time fling or a mistake. Who the hell were you having an affair with?" "Hell, it must have happened in the first year of our marriage. It was Harvey. I had an affair with him. It was stupid, wrong, but it's over. It seems to be all over. Ever since Harvey died about 25 years ago, he was one of our best friends, and you slept with him. Did his wife, Mary, know about it? Did she participate in your sexual escapades?" I asked. "Please, Dan, let's not discuss this. I love you. This is all ancient history. Can't we just move on?" Annie begged. "Are you out of your mind? What the hell is going on with you? We got married, and within a year, you started having sex with Harvey. You have his child, who I raised as my own. And 2 years later, while you're still sleeping with him, we had a daughter, who I'm raising as my own as well. If he hadn't died shortly after Janice was born, you'd probably still be having sex with him. Thank God at least one of my children belongs to me. Are you ready to explain all this?" I demanded. Annie was crying, but I wasn't buying it. I wanted to know the truth. I deserved to know the truth. Unlike the movies, I could handle the truth. "I know you and Harvey have always been friends. I always loved him, but he chose Mary over me. He got her pregnant. I loved you too, but not as much as Harvey. After he and Mary got married, I was very depressed. You asked me to marry you, and I did it, half out of spite. I wanted Harvey to know that I went on living in spite of him. So, you married me to mess with Harvey, and to mess with him even more, you ended up having sex with him behind my back. You were on the tow truck a lot back then. Mary was working during the day, and Harvey came by to see you, at least that's what he said. I didn't plan it, it just happened. I don't have any excuses. We had a sexual relationship, and I knew I still loved him. He would come to me and always told me that one day we would be together. We just don't have to rush it, he'd say. I was a child, and as long as he made love to me, I didn't care. He stopped seeing me after I got pregnant with Brad. I was really mad at him. He came over and saw Brad and asked if the baby was his. I told him I didn't know, but I wasn't going to tell you anything until he married me. He laughed at me and said you could raise his baby. Do you really believe I'm that stupid? It just happened. What just happened? If you're going to convince me that it just happened, then you're stupider than I can imagine. If you stopped seeing him, what about Janice? Did that happen to her too? I told him he wasn't allowed in our house unless you or Mary were here. I had feelings for him, but I found out he was just using me for extra sex. One day he came over and forced me to have sex with him. He said if I refused, he would tell you about Brad. He hurt me. He didn't make love to me, he hurt me a lot. When he left, he laughed and said he hoped he had put another baby in me. I couldn't tell you about it. I didn't want to lose you. Shortly after Janice was born, Harvey was taken away in a car accident. I was saddened but relieved at the same time. I could finally put all the cheating behind me, and we could start living a normal life. I loved you more and more. Our life was good, wasn't it? Annie asked. Yes, our marriage was good. But now, looking back, I see that it was all based on lies. You cheated on me, you married me while loving another man, you had a child with another man, and then you said you were raped and got pregnant again without telling me. And now you're telling me to just forget about it. I don't think I can, and I don't want to. I'm going to see our lawyer and start divorce proceedings. Dan, you can't. What about our kids? What are you going to tell them? I'll leave that up to you. Just so you know, I don't think you were raped, and you would have continued to have sex with him if he hadn't been removed. You have a week to tell me your story for the kids. After that, I'll tell them the truth. I take it Brad and Janice don't know that I am not their biological father? Of course you don't. No one knows but me and now you. Please, Dan, they love you. Don't hurt them by telling them that a man they've never met is their father. I am their father, and they are my children. Nothing will ever change that. I've been with them their whole lives, and that won't change. I think we'll both live here until the final contract is finalized, unless you have a lover in mind. It's inappropriate, Dan, and you know it. No, that's the problem. I've been with you for 30 years, and I don't know you. I'll move my stuff into the guest bedroom. I don't want anything more to do with you. Annie started crying as I got up from the table and started moving a few of my things into the guest room. 2 days later, I got a call from the store. They said that my wife's car had driven over a guardrail and fallen onto an embankment. According to them, it looks like she was speeding, going too fast, and didn't have time to turn. She was pronounced dead at the scene. The sheriff questioned me about any problems my wife might have had. I replied that there were none to the best of my knowledge. He said he was classifying it as an accident but was going to hold the report until after the autopsy. I couldn't imagine having to bring all the dirty laundry out into the light. Now, I loved her, but I also hated her, if that's possible. I called all the children and told them about their mother's death. I told them I was going to the hospital to identify the body. They could call a few relatives and pass on the news. I knew it was a shock to everyone, even me. Now it was on my conscience. She took her own life, or it was an accident. A few days later, the autopsy came back clean. Other than the blood pressure medication, the coroner found nothing. Her death was ruled accidental. At the funeral, I grieved for her, even though I was going through a divorce. I still had strong feelings for her. After 30 years of living with her, I was glad I hadn't met with a lawyer yet. No one needed to know about Annie's secret affair. I would have to live with it. It wouldn't do any good if I told my kids about it. The day after the funeral, my 2 daughters and daughter-in-law came into the house. I asked them to take all of my mother's personal belongings and divide them between them all. All I asked for were a few pictures of us as a family. No one can understand how bad I felt unless they have gone through something similar themselves. The questions of what if kept running through my mind. What if I had never taken this test? What if I never told about it? What if I hadn't told her I was leaving her? Would any of that have changed, or was she just going too fast that day? Chapter 2, Get Involved. This all happened 2 years ago, just before the holidays, and here I was alone again for the holidays. My son and oldest daughter now live about 100 miles away from me. I told them I could come up for a day or 2 during the vacations. Mandy was a senior in college and said she was going to England with friends for the vacations. The trip was organized by the college. She had asked me about it a few months ago. She was worried that I would be alone. I tried to explain to the kids that I had been living alone for 2 years now. I spent every day at the service station shop and was never alone there. One day, I was sitting in my big comfy chair, watching a few programs on my old television set. On came a commercial I had seen over and over again about donating $24 a month to give a child in a third world country 3 meals a day, a place to live over their head, proper health care, and a school education. What the hell? Do people really believe that? Don't get me wrong, I'm all for feeding the hungry and helping those who can't help themselves, but if I could do all that for $24 a month, I should have moved there myself. Sorry, but I'm not big on sending money and hoping it goes to help children. To those who do it and believe in it, I wish you success, and may God bless you. However, it gave me an idea. The next day, when I was at the store, one of our local priests came in, and I asked him if the church was doing one of those Christmas campaigns where they put up a tree and then write on it the names of families who need help for the holidays. Well, yes, Dan, we have one. Do you have a family name you'd like to publish? No, Pastor Jim, I need the name of a family. I can help over the holidays, great. Dan, just come to the church and pick a name. The Christmas tree is pretty full this year. A lot of people are out of work. Jim, can you give me the name of someone you think really needs help? I don't want it to be a family that is having a hard time with a husband who just got laid off. I want a family whose help during the holidays will really make a difference. I'm not just going to give the child a toy. I want to make sure this is a holiday they will never forget. Pastor Jim smiled at me. I think he realized that I wanted to make a difference in my family's life. Dan, I think I have the perfect family for you. We have a young widow with 3 children. They moved here from the big city last year. Her husband was shot during a drug deal gone bad, and she moved here to try to give the kids a fresh start in life. Okay, Jim, thank you so much. I know I'm not the church-going type, but I want to help someone this year. I'll come by later and get the name of the family. When I told Pastor Jim that I didn't like church, he understood what I meant. I believed in God or something bigger than myself when Annie was alive. I went to church twice a year. I always heard a sermon about where Jesus was born and when he died on the cross. The rest of the time, I attended weddings and funerals. Carmela Wilson was the name on a piece of paper I'd taken off a tree at church. A widow with 3 kids and a dress and a phone number. Pastor Jim told me she worked as a waitress at Joe's restaurant. I think I knew who he was talking about. I've eaten at that restaurant dozens of times in the last year, if not more. I bet the waitress named Carmen was called exactly what Jim had told me her name was. I would go into the store and make sure everything was under control. I was a pretty hands-on boss. I decided to stop by Joe's diner and talk to Carmen. As I walked in, I looked around, and Joe waved at me. We had been friends since we were kids, plus, of course, we were both business owners, which made us a little more communal. I sat down at one of the tables and looked around. It was the time between breakfast and lunch, so it was pretty sparse. I noticed Carmen, who smiled and said she'd be right over. A little information about Carmen: she was in her early 30s, a pleasant-looking woman but hardly classifiable as beautiful. She was neat and attractive with shoulder-length dark hair. She had nice legs and a normal bust, however normal it was. It stuck out, but you couldn't put a beer on it. She definitely wasn't thin, but she wasn't fat either. Hell, explaining a woman's facial features is harder than I thought. She had a nice smile, that much I knew for sure. "What can I do for you?" she asked. "Just a cup of coffee and some conversation, if you don't mind." "Yes, for coffee, but I don't know about this conversation," she replied. "I'm sorry, I don't know how to talk to women. This is not a flirtation. I picked your name on the tree at church, and I want to be your friend for the holidays. Look, I'm not really sure what you want. I'll just go get you some coffee." I watched as she went to talk to Joe, and he shook his head. When she came back with my coffee, I said, "Okay, Joe says you're fine. I get hit on by men quite often, and I don't need that in my life right now. So, what do you want? What's a holiday friend? I know the church put my kids' names on the tree so they could have Christmas, but they never talked about a friend." "Friend. This is my idea, please let me explain. If you want me to just buy the kids the present when I'm done, that's what I'll do." Without going into too much detail, I was watching TV when a guy said that for $24 a month, I could sponsor a child in another country. They would feed them 3 times a day, give them clothes, schooling, and a roof over their head, all for $24 a month. Dan, isn't it? My kids have $24 worth of milk a month. I can hardly make more than that. She smiled. She had such a beautiful smile. "I know, I agree. I have decided that I will be adopting a family from now until the holidays. I want to help you with your material needs through Thanksgiving and Christmas. I want your family to have a memorable Christmas. I am not rich, but I can spare enough money to try to help one family this year, and I have chosen yours." Carmen's eyes were glassy. "Are you serious? I was so worried about my kids this year. You see, my husband was laid off." "I know, Carmen, he was murdered. Please let me help you help your children. If you feel I'm interfering in your life, just tell me, and I'll back off. Why are you doing this? Don't you have family you could help, not a stranger? Look, my wife died 2 years ago. She died in a car accident. God, I feel so sorry for you." "It's okay, Carmen. Anyway, my holidays were pretty lousy, and I wanted to try to help someone else be happy this year. I have 3 grown children. My son is in his 30s, and my daughter, I think it's 29. They are both married and have families of their own. The youngest daughter is a college graduate who is going to England for Christmas. Neither of them are in financial difficulty, so what do you say? Shall we be friends for the holidays? You have a kind face, Dan. For the sake of my children, I'll say yes, please. No tricks. My family and I have been through a lot in the last year. So what do you want from me? It's a good idea to start by restocking your coffee and getting an idea of some of your needs." She poured coffee and said she needed to get back to work. Joe was nice, but she needs to do her job. We agreed to talk after she left work. The next day, I asked her out to dinner, but she said she needed to be around the kids. But I could come to her house and talk there. I can even have dinner with them if I like macaroni and cheese. Tell you what, Carmen, I'll pick up the pizza, and we can eat it. Pepperoni and cheese, okay? She smiled. That would be great, but you better bring 2 pizzas. My 8-year-old can eat half of one by himself. I went over to her place tonight. I didn't know she lived in a project. For those who don't know about these places, I will tell you that they are on public assistance provided by social services or children's services. These organizations help with rent, food, and other things. The bad thing is that it's not the best place to live. A lot of drug addicts and undesirables usually live there. Now I knew that more than anything, I wanted to help Carmen and her children. I was met at the door by her 8-year-old son. He was a cute boy and asked what I wanted. I explained that I was a pizza delivery boy and that his mom had invited me to visit. He smiled broadly and said, "Mom said her friend is bringing us pizza today. We don't get pizza from the store very often." As I entered the store, 2 other children ran up to me screaming, "Pizza! Pizza! Pizza! Mommy, the pizza place is here," a 6-year-old shouted. Carmen entered from the other room. "Children, where are your manners? I thought I taught you how to behave in company." "Sorry, Mom, we were just a little excited," her oldest son looked at me. "We don't get visitors very often. Can we have pizza already, kids?" "This is Dan, a friend of mine." "You can call him Uncle Dan or Mr. Dan," I interrupted. "Or just call me Dan." "What's your name?" The oldest spoke first. "My name is Mike, and I'm 8 years old." Then the second one said, "I'm Mark, and I'm 6 years old." "This is my little sister, Molly." "Let me tell you," Molly said, "I know who I am. My name is Molly, and I am 4 years old, soon to be 5. I go to kindergarten, and I am very smart." She was the sweetest little girl and looked a lot like her mom. Everyone sat down at the table and started eating pizza. I looked around the room and realized that this was a struggling family. The furniture was old, and they didn't seem to have much stuff. Of course, I only saw the kitchen and living room. The TV was on, but the picture wasn't the best. While the kids ate pizza and watched cartoons on TV, I asked Carmen what she would like help with. Oh my God, I wasn't prepared for this look. My kids and I are doing fine. We eat pretty well, but they like what the other kids have, and I just can't afford to buy it for them. You've seen our stupid TV with the crappy picture. I bought basic cable so they have something to watch. We buy our clothes secondhand, but they are happy with whatever they get. They are really great kids. I'm afraid to buy bikes or anything else we have to leave outside. I know they'll get stolen. So, Dan, take this to heart. My kids would love any gift. Okay, I'll see what I can do to help. Your children do seem very good. Mike, since you're the oldest, don't you think everyone would like to go to the movies on Saturday? I heard there's a new Harry Potter movie coming out. Wow, that would be great, Mom. Can we go? Can we? I think so, but only if you few kids behave yourselves for the rest of the week. Carmen, you know this is about you too. Maybe we'll eat at McDonald's while we're there. Molly looked up at me. I like McDonald's. They have Happy Meals and a playground and everything. All right, Molly, be a good girl for Mommy, and we'll go there on Saturday. The kids were happy, and Carmen was smiling. I decided that I had done a good job. Making them happy made me happy. It went on like that for several weekends. We took the kids to places where they could just have fun. I would go to Joe's restaurant for lunch and always sat in Carmen's area. I started leaving her big tips, $10 or so each. Dan, you don't need to do that. Just make my kids happy, that's all I need. So you don't need the money? I smiled. That's not fair, Dan. Sure, I can use the money, it's just I just feel awkward, to say the least. I feel indebted to you for everything you do for my kids. Can I make you guys Thanksgiving dinner or something? I need to do something for you too now. I'll talk to the kids, see what's on our agenda, and call you back, Carmen. I do this for you because it gives me pleasure. I enjoy helping people who are trying to help themselves. Please don't feel that you owe me. Just seeing the look on the children's faces is more than enough payback. Besides, seeing you smile is a pleasure in itself, I said. You could see that it embarrassed her slightly, and she looked away. Mandy came home one weekend and asked me what was new. I told her about Carmen and how I had tried to help her dad. Do you think this is a good idea? You don't know this woman, do you, honey? I asked. It's a new meaning of life for me to help someone and see the faces of these little ones. Honestly, I feel better about what I'm doing, I replied. I started the conversation with Carmen. I want you to meet Carmen and tell me what you think. I don't know, Dad. I'm kind of uneasy. You say they live in a neighborhood. Isn't that a pretty bad neighborhood for a single woman and her kids? Exactly. That's why I'm trying to help them. Maybe it will help them get back on their feet. Mandy, you've always been my little girl, and now you've grown into a beautiful woman. You don't need my help as much anymore, so I feel like I should help someone. I'll tell you what, I'll have Carmen come over so you can meet her and the kids, and you give me your opinion, okay? Dad, but no promises. I'll be as honest with you as I can be. I won't sugarcoat it, she replied. I knew Mandy was a little worried. She was my rock and always looked out for me. I know she would have told me the truth. She was a lot like me. It was out of character for her to lie. On Saturday, I invited Carmen and the kids over to my house. It was a little chilly, but I decided to grill anyway. I decided that while I cooked outside, Mandy would do her own grilling inside. Carmen appeared in the wrecked car. She had all the kids buckled in and was already unbuckling their seatbelts when Mandy looked at me. Nice car, Daddy, she said, meaning, of course, the opposite. What makes you think I'm helping them? What would you say if she drove up in a new car? I asked. That's a great idea, Dad. This is for you, she smiled. Mike and Mark ran up to me. Hey, Uncle Dan. Wow, you guys live here? Wow, what a big house, they exclaimed. I introduced the boys to Mandy as Carmen led Molly out of the car. Mike, Mark, this is my little girl, Mandy. Hi, boys. Nice to meet you, Mandy replied. Hi, I'm Mike. I'm 8, and Mark is 6. This is Molly, getting out of the car. She's our little sister. She's 4 years old, Mike explained. Molly walked over to me, and I lifted her into my arms. Mandy watched me carefully. Molly is my little friend. She holds her own against her brothers, just like you, I laughed. Carmen, this is Mandy, my pride and joy, and also my youngest daughter, I said as they greeted each other. I like her already, Daddy, Mandy said. They smiled at each other, and we headed into the house. The kids wanted to explore the house. I told them it was okay, but to stay out of the drawers and not to run around. They went from room to room, came back, and told their mom about everything they saw. They asked if they could watch my big screen TV, and I asked them if they wanted to go to the store with me and pick out a couple DVDs to watch. Of course, they said yes, and Molly asked if she could go too. Carmen intervened. Molly, why don't you stay here with me and Mandy and help us cook? We girls need to be together. She must have told Molly what was needed because Molly looked at me and said, Uncle Dan, take the boys and go ahead. I have to help the girls cook. It was so funny to hear that from a 4-year-old. I told her that it was okay and that I would rent a movie just for her. I ended up renting the movie The Little Mermaid for her, and she was smiling a lot when she watched it. She asked Mandy and her mom to watch it with her. She told the boys that they could watch it too, but they had to be quiet. It was so funny to hear her trying to act like an adult. The girls decided that we would spend Thanksgiving at our house. Carmen and Mandy would cook dinner, and I would keep the kids busy, which wasn't too hard to do. I have a pool, but it is closed for the winter. However, I also have a hot tub. The kids were going to bring their bathing suits and soak in it. Afterward, they would watch movies on the big TV. We had over a month to plan Thanksgiving dinner, so Mandy said she would contact Brad and Janice and let them know about dinner at our house. She would also tell them about Carmen and the kids. Also, anyone who wants to use the hot tub should bring their bathing suits. I had a nice chat with Mandy after Carmen and the kids went home. Dad, Carmen is a very nice person. She is very sympathetic and is not afraid of work. She told me about her past and about her husband's murder. It was horrible, everything she had to go through. I understand why you want to help her, especially with the children. She doesn't make excuses for her life, and you can see that she is really trying to keep it together. I have to tell you, Daddy, that I think she really cares about you. Of course, she will. I'm helping her and her family. I hope she'll be grateful to me, at least a little. No, Daddy, I mean care in the sense of really like, maybe even love. She didn't say that, did she, Dad? She didn't have to do that. We women can sense these things. I think you've fallen in love with her too, Daddy. All I ask is that you be very careful and considerate. Come on, Mandy. I'm just happy for her. This is the happiest I've seen you since Mom died over 2 years ago. Dad, I'm glad to see you happy. I just want you to be more aware of your situation. I knew Mandy was right. I had strong feelings for Carmen and the kids. I didn't know where they would lead, but I recognized it. I just didn't know anyone else was as observant. I got a separate call from Brad and Janet. I did my best to explain that I was helping Carmen during the holidays and that I had learned the family's name from the Christmas tree at church. I think I did a pretty good job of embellishing the situation. I explained to them that Carmen wanted to say thank you by helping prepare Thanksgiving dinner. I knew they were a little wary of the situation but agreed to come to dinner. For the next couple of weeks, Carmen and Mandy helped organize all the events. They acted almost like sisters, with Carmen being the oldest and doing most of the planning. Of course, Mandy went to school most of the week and came home on Fridays. I stopped by almost every day for lunch at a restaurant and mostly to see Carmen. At least twice a week, I stopped by her apartment to say hello to the kids and bring them some treats. Carmen told me that I spoiled them. I have to say it bothered me a little when I watched Carmen at her job. She was always so friendly and nice to everyone. I saw men hitting on her, but she always smiled and refused advances or dates. I guess it was natural for me. I had no right to be jealous of her, even for dating, let alone being friendly with other people. Chapter 3: Change on Thanksgiving Day. Carmen and her children arrived early. She looked very beautiful. She wasn't dressed in any special way, but even in a skirt and blouse, she was a very attractive woman. She and Mandy had already started cooking. Mandy told us that she had invited her boyfriend to dinner as well. I had met him a few times. He was a paramedic and was still taking classes at the college where he met Mandy, who was training to be a nurse. They were both part of a group going to England to help out at the hospital during the vacations. They would leave the week before Christmas and return home on January 8th the following year. It was less than a month before they left, but it would be sad if she wasn't around during that time. Brad, his wife Gail, and my 2 grandchildren showed up. I hugged them all, and the kids asked when they could go in the hot tub. I told them I wanted to introduce them to the other kids later. I introduced them to Mike, Mark, and Molly. All the kids seemed to get along great with each other. We walked to the kitchen, and Mandy hugged her brother and started introducing him to Carmen. Brad, Gail, this is Carmen, a good friend of Dad and me. I felt good when she said that. Brad said hello, but I knew the gears were turning in his head. Gail said hi and asked the girls if they needed help. No sooner had everyone gotten back to cooking than Janice and her husband Rob came in. We started getting reacquainted, and Janice's kids ran down to the basement to play with the other kids. In the basement, we had a lot of games, coloring books, and things like that for the kids. It had been completely remodeled and had a TV and DVD player, so there was plenty for the kids to do. The women went back to cooking, and us guys tried to stay out of their way. I knew the guys wanted to know more about Carmen. I tried to explain her story to them without showing my feelings. I guess I wasn't very good at it. She looks good, Daddy. How old is she? Brad asked. About the same age as me, Brad. She's 31 years old, I replied. She's a wonderful person and deserves a little help, Rob put in. Daddy, he always called me Daddy. Aren't you afraid she might fall in love with you? Or you with her? Look, I'm a widower and she's a widow. Of course, she's much younger, but if something happens, so be it, Dad. You haven't been with her. This is kind of inappropriate and definitely personal, Brad. Since you're my son, I'll tell you. Believe it or not, I didn't even try to kiss her. I'll tell you right now that she's a wonderful woman and I care about her. I'm sorry, Dad. I know it's none of my business, and you must miss Mom. After all, it's been 2 years. This has nothing to do with your mother. In case you haven't noticed, I'm a very lively person, and if I find someone attractive, that's my business. I suggest we change the subject, and actually, we'd better go check on all the kids. Your wives are cooking, and you two had better babysit. We went downstairs and watched the kids. Carmen's children seemed to get along fine with each other. Every few minutes, Molly came up to me to talk. I knew it bothered Brad, but Rob thought she was the sweetest little girl. Mandy went downstairs and brought her boyfriend, Ross, down to introduce him to everyone. I've met him a few times, and I think he's met Brad before. After introductions, Mandy went back upstairs, and Ross joined the conversation. I just met Mandy's friend Carmen. She's a very nice woman. Mandy told me that her husband was murdered. That's too bad, Ross said. I called Carmen's kids over and introduced them to Ross. Good kids. Too bad their father was killed. I think it's great that you're helping them, Mr. Weller, Ross replied. Thank you, Ross. I picked a name off the tree at church, and I actually found a family in great need. I didn't want anyone to know that I had asked Pastor Jim to find a certain type of family. So, Ross, what's new with you? School and work must be taking up a lot of your time, I asked. Yes, that's true, but we're going on a trip in a couple of weeks. Although it's work-related, I'll have a chance to get away for a while and be with Mandy. How are you and Mandy doing? Brad asked. Ross looked at me, then back at Brad. I love her, and I'm thinking of asking her to marry me when we're in England, in front of Big Ben, you know, the big clock. Mr. Weller, do I have your permission to propose to her? Ross asked. You don't need my permission. Mandy is a strong-willed woman and quite capable of making her own decisions. If you need my blessing, you'll get it. Is that a sure thing? Should I ask her? I think so, but please, none of you mention it just in case. I will try to find out if she is ready to get married before I pop the question. I love her, but I want a yes answer, he replied. Our lips are sealed, Ross, and good luck to you, I said. I understood how he felt. Truth be told, I felt the same way he did, but I knew it was best not to talk about it right now. The afternoon went wonderfully. Dinner was fantastic, and everyone seemed to enjoy themselves. The kids took turns swimming in the hot tub. I couldn't get any of the adults to go in it. Carmen told me, maybe another time. I knew I would hold her to that. As the evening wore on, Mandy and Ross left to be alone. I helped Carmen clean the house. Janice and Gail came over and helped. When we were done, Brad and his family were just about to leave. Brad told Carmen that it was nice to meet her and wished her luck. He hoped everything would work out for her. Before leaving, Janice pulled me aside. Daddy, Carmen is a good person, but she's too young for you, she said. Where did that come from? I'm helping her, Dad, I replied. She loves you, any fool can see that. We asked her if she was dating, and she said she had a boyfriend. Daddy, you are that boyfriend. Otherwise, she wouldn't have come here today. Just be careful, Dad. After everyone left, Carmen gathered the kids and told me she had a great time. She liked my family and thought they were all nice. I don't know why I did it, but I leaned forward and kissed her. It was a long, soft kiss. When we pulled away, tears came to her eyes. You didn't have to do that, Dan. I have to go, she said, picking up the kids, who quickly said goodbye to me and got into the car. I went to the car window and said to Carmen, I'm sorry. I stepped out of line. Please forgive me. The problem is, Dan, I've wanted you to do this for so long. With those words, she pulled her old car off the road and headed home. I didn't hear from her on Friday, Saturday, or even Sunday. I was worried about what I had done. On Monday, I went to the restaurant, but she wasn't there. Joe told me that she had to take Molly to daycare today and would be back in a little while. I had to stop by the store and decided to come back at lunchtime, but one of my employees was sick and I had to stay and work my shift. I tried to give Carmen some space after I crossed the line. After all, I was supposed to be a vacation buddy, not her lover. I got home, and then my phone rang. I looked at the caller ID and saw that it was Carmen. Hi, Carmen, I said. I'm so sorry, Dan. Our apartment was broken into. I just got home from taking the kids, and someone took our stuff, even the old TV. All we have left are our clothes, she cried. I don't know what to do. The police are here now taking a report. They thought it was someone looking for things to pawn for drugs. We don't have anything of value, but they took what little we had. God, how awful. Carmen, get your suitcases or bags or something and put your and the kids' clothes in there. I'll be there in about 15 minutes. Everything will be fine, I promise you, I assured her. Dan, I didn't know who else. She began. It's okay, Carmen. I'm glad I was the one you called. Now go pack your things, and I'll be there soon, I said. I took the car and went to get Carmen and the kids. Molly was crying and said she was scared. I told her everything was going to be okay. I would take them all back to my house. Carmen looked up at me in surprise. I thought you were dropping us off at a motel for the night, she said. No, you're all going home with me. Put all the stuff you packed in your car. Take my car and the kids, I'll drive yours with your stuff, I instructed. She didn't ask any questions, she just did what I said. I talked to the police officer and told him they could contact her at my house. I gave him my phone number if he needed to contact us. He told me that they probably wouldn't get any of her stuff back. She didn't list anything of real value that they could trace. All they did was trash the apartment pretty badly. I thanked the officer, got into Carmen's clunker, and tried to start it. I was unable to start it. The officer helped me start it, and I headed home. When I arrived, Carmen and the children were sitting on the porch. Why didn't you come in? Carmen asked. You weren't here, and we weren't just going to walk in, I replied. Come on, boys, help me get all these bags in. Mike, you and Mark take your stuff to the bedroom with the bunk beds. If it's Molly's stuff or your mom's stuff, put it in the front bedroom, the one across from M's room. You know which one, I instructed. Yes, sir, the boys replied. The boys' stuff is upstairs, the girls' stuff is downstairs. If you're not sure, put it in the living room, and your mom will decide for herself, I said to Carmen. Carmen, you need to come and talk to me, I said. Molly, why don't you help the boys and make sure they do it right? I suggested. Of course, Molly said eagerly. Carmen, what are you doing? We can't live here. What will your kids think? I asked. Carmen, you need help right now, today. Let's try to do this my way for a few days. That will give us time to figure out what to do. You and Molly can share the front bedroom, and the boys will be more than comfortable upstairs, I explained. Dan, the boys have school, and Molly has kindergarten. I have to work, she protested. And how does living here get in the way of that? You just have to leave about 15 minutes early. I can help, too. I'll drive Molly or the boys to school. Call them tomorrow and explain that your house was broken into and that you'll be driving the boys to school. Give my name so I can drop them off and pick them up. It'll work out, Carmen, I promise, I assured her. Dan, I care about you. I like you a lot. Your kids know that, and I need you to know that, she said. Did you tell them? I asked. Thank you for watching part 1. Please click the link to part 2 below the description. If you find these contents helpful, feel free to share them with your friends and family. Thank you for your support, and have a great day.